Yeah, no, your point's really good.
Dude, this worked 3 times.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a time schedule.
Would it help me? Would it help if I
Oh no, we're
laughed
going.
at myself?
Yeah, no, we're up.
Oh, we are?
Excellent.
Oh, perfect.
Alrighty. Perfect. Are we ready to get started?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Detox to Rehab live stream reflections. And with me today is Corey, Connor, and Bianca.
Hello.
As always, thank you for joining. So today's reflections are going to be coming from the Just for Today as well as the daily reflections readings. So I'm going to start with the Just for Today. It begins with taking a quote from Basic Text, page 36. And it says, "To be truly humble is to accept and honestly try to be ourselves." Humility is a puzzling concept. We know a lot about humiliation, but humility is a new idea. It sounds suspiciously like groveling, bowing, and scraping. But that's not what humility is at all. True humility is simply acceptance of who we are. By the time we reach a step that uses the word humbly, we have already started to put this principle into practice. The 4th step gives us an opportunity to examine who we really are, and the 5th step helps us accept that knowledge. The practice of humility involves accepting our true nature, honestly being ourselves. We don't have to grovel or abase ourselves, nor must we try to appear smarter, wealthier, or happier than we really are. Humility simply means we drop all pretense and live as honestly as we can. So just for today, I will allow knowledge of my true nature to guide my actions. Today, I will face the world as myself. Nice.
I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I feel like it's kind of easier to pretend to be smarter, wealthier, or happier to make you feel better about yourself. Because sometimes that's what I do. In order to feel accepted, since I don't have drugs and alcohol, I put it in a different sense. Like, oh, I'm smarter than I really am. Oh, I have more money than I truly do, and wealthier as in happiness. I tend to do that a lot because sometimes I'm afraid of who I truly am, because I know the person I used to be was someone that got high and killed themselves slowly, like day by day, and I don't want to be that person anymore. And being myself, I feel like, I don't know, my mind tricks itself into being like, if you be yourself, you're going to be the person that you don't want to be, which is the person I was in active addiction.
Yeah.
But I just, as it says in the reading, I try and live as honestly as I can, and even that means messing up sometimes. Like, as long as I learn from it, I think everything's going to be fine.
Yeah, being honest about progress.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I know, and it talks about in here, humility, living as honestly as we can, examining who we are and accepting that. And I remember when I first started trying to get sober, humility meant accepting that I really didn't know who I was. So when I first got here, I didn't know what I liked or didn't like. I didn't really know who I was or what I was capable of, because I had spent such a long time just being a person who got high and did everything I could to continue getting high. And so then it came time for the 4th and 5th step, and I had to look at all of that and sort of change that story I had been telling about my life and who I was into, I guess, a realistic appraisal of who I was, right, and where I was at, and where, where these character defects were really glaring, what flaws were showing through, basically where I was deficient as a person. And once I could accept that, it didn't make me feel good to look at all that, where I was falling short in life, but it gave me a point to grow from. And I had to be humble enough to look at that and just see that for what it was, rather than try and twist it into something better or not as bad, or try to spin reasons into why I did the things I did. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Because, really, it's humility that's kind of the root of honesty. And, it's kind of hard to be in recovery if you're not really honest about where you are.
Yeah.
Well, I think recovery, for me at least, is being okay with who you are without substances in the mix. Like, because when I was using, I felt as if I was okay with myself in the moment. And when I would sober up, I would try and get more of the drugs and the alcohol to be okay with who I was in the moment. And today, because of the 12-step fellowship and meetings and my sponsor and prayer and meditation, I slowly am okay with myself, even though, like what I said before, there is still times where I'm afraid to be myself because who I was in the past. But, yeah.
Oh, very
I
nice.
lost my train of thought.
Oh, you're all good.
I definitely agree with what both of you said. For me, when I was getting high, I remember a lot of the time waking up with a feeling like, okay, I have lots of things to do.
Sorry, I've been there.
So I have to get high before I can do any of those things. That's just the way it goes. But then I would get high, and it was like, well, I gotta get high again,
Yeah.
you know, like that. So that continually the cycle starts over, and it's the only thing that's important really is getting high. And so I definitely didn't really know, like, I guess who I was or what I liked, or, you know, I didn't have real relationships. So these are definitely things that I had to find out when I got sober, and I didn't even know where to start. I was listening to a speaker. He was a good friend of mine, actually, and one of the things he was talking about was how eventually, if you're in the rooms long enough, you're going to look around and not want to be anybody else but yourself. And that was something I could not relate with at first. I just wanted to be, I mean, not anybody but me, but there was definitely a lot of people around me that I would have traded lives with. Like, I am so uncomfortable in my skin. I don't know what I like to do. I don't feel like I'm good at anything. Like, my self-esteem is so low that I don't like myself.
Right.
I would have given anything to feel the way other people looked.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Like these people that are happy when you come in and you're just getting sober, and that's a hard thing to look at and to get through, because it feels like you're never going to get to that place where, like, okay, I'm all right with being who I am and the things that are going on in my life. This talks about the 4th step giving us an opportunity to examine who we really are. And yes, it definitely does. Like, that's looking at, like, awful behaviors that we've done and all the crappy things that we've done to other people and how we've treated them and ourselves. And it takes, you know, an objective look at those things. And then also during the process of these steps, continuing to have good behaviors, right? So that I build up time and experience with being honest, with, you know, being a man of my word, with showing up, with doing all these things, and then I get a chance to see who I can be.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's how it goes for me. As far as humility, when it talks about, you know, not being humiliation versus humility, I think it's just about taking that objective look at yourself and realizing that I'm a human. There's good and bad things, and I'm a part of a whole. I'm not better than or less than.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one concept that I think would be really interesting with this topic is kind of tying along the lines of, say, like a false pretense of like doing really, really well. And I mean, if you kind of throw like the societal stigma, you know, around addiction and recovery, because I know there are a lot of people out there that they still kind of operate by the moral model where it's more viewing addiction as a fault in one's character, that it's just an issue of weak willpower. So I'm just kind of curious. I mean, how do you guys feel that, you know, being in the recovery community, having to kind of fight that urge to just try to represent well by trying to make it look like everything's right and perfect all the time?
Well, everything isn't right and perfect all the time, at least in my life, you know. And I think it's better to be okay with the faults than to pretend like everything's fine, because that's just you being fake again. And for me, I was totally fake in my addiction. I was being anyone but myself. Like, I wanted to be anyone but myself. And now, since I'm slowly becoming okay with myself, it's okay that I make mistakes, and it's okay that I do things. And also, for newcomers, like, if you're up at a meeting and you're speaking, you need to speak how you normally would. You need to speak about, like, what's going on in your life today, not what you want your life to be like today. And that's because you can go and hang out with these people after the meeting, and they can see, like, oh, your life is completely different than what you speaked about, and I guess it's okay to be fake. And that's what we're trying to move away from, is becoming someone different than ourselves. And in my opinion, that's what fake is being someone who you're not, and who you want to be that you're not, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I remember kind of when I was first trying to get sober and showing up to meetings and stuff, I thought that was going to happen, that at some point I was going to come out the other side this perfect person. And that it hasn't happened yet, you know. It might happen. But even if I were to do that, to go to a meeting and just go on and on about how good my life is and how good I am, and
Just gonna piss people off.
well, yeah, and pull that off for an hour, and then go be like a normal, like, not great person for the rest of the day. People are gonna see that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's gonna seem fake and deceptive, and like, why was I lying about this? And you know, and it would have turned me off if I had shown up as beat down and broken as I was when I showed up to a meeting, and there's all these people just going on and on about how perfect their lives are. Like, well, clearly we are two totally different kinds of people. I don't need to be here anymore.
Right.
But I was fortunate enough that I showed up, and you know, what really kind of drew me to this whole thing was I showed up, and there were a lot of people who, they were probably doing a little bit better than me, but they were the same as me. You know, regardless of what was going on around them, they had felt the same way I was feeling in that moment. And they weren't perfect. They still weren't perfect. They still had their flaws. They were regular people. And that was something I could relate to, and that drew me in, you know. So I don't know if any of what I just said makes sense.
No, it makes perfect
sense.
I think it just really helps that, you know, if there is a newcomer, you know, it really would make all world of difference to know that everyone was at that stage at one point. And it's all a matter of, you know, it's not necessarily where everyone is now, but everybody has their own, you know, path to walk.
Right. And sometimes I feel like people are afraid to be like, oh, I have nothing to show for my recovery. And when you're up there and you're saying all these things that they may be true, but you're, you know, what's the word I'm looking for?
Embellished.
Embellished. Yeah, I'd say so, yeah. Now I lost my train of thought.
It's all good.
This
Well,
happens to me a lot.
actually, it's good timing, though, because we just got a question in
Okay.
from Claudia. And she asked, while you guys were getting sober, how long did it take for you guys to be happy with yourself? This is in reference to Connor and Corey's comment about wanting to be anybody but themselves in the beginning of your journey.
How long did it take for me to be okay with myself?
When can you fart and be alright?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. That sounds so weird.
Yeah. But it's, you know, there are times where I'm cool with it, like, oh yeah, this is who I am, and it's pretty awesome. There are other times where this is who I am, and I'm not as cool with it right now. It goes back and forth, but the times where I'm comfortable with who I am are far more prevalent than the times where I am so awkward and uneasy, and I don't like anything about me. That doesn't happen very often. Usually late at night, right before I fall asleep, and I start thinking about all those weird things I've done that I'm
gosh.
ashamed of.
Oh, my.
So I'm not the only one?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's interesting. I mean, it's always kind of varies on a case-by-case basis. I mean, Connor, was there a point where you just kind of had this pivotal moment where you definitely felt like this notable change?
So I remember specifically the day that I was allowed to leave after going through an inpatient rehab, and a couple friends of mine thought it would be a good idea to go to the mall. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's go to the mall. And no intentions of getting high or anything like that. But I went walking through this mall, and I definitely noticed a lot of things about myself after going through inpatient and like learning all of this stuff about, you know, what's going on with me and inside my head and why I feel the way I feel and all this. I freaked out. I panicked because like I realized like this is the first time where I recognize that I know that I feel like this because I'm not okay with who I am. Like I had a panic attack, like out in the real world, like just I couldn't even tell you the crazy things running through my mind about what all these people are thinking about me when they're probably just going about their day and you know, and in my head like they're like it's a catastrophe, like like I'm getting weird looks and being judged like crazy, and it's just not the truth. And it took it took months to be like okay with who I am, and it takes lots of work, but it's possible. And like I was talking about earlier, like at this point now, a couple years sober, I really wouldn't trade my life for anybody else's. I like being who I am. I'm comfortable in my skin, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. And,
Right.
you know, the 12-step program has given that to me.
And I think for me, a lot of that, when that stopped happening, the whole walking past a group of people and they start laughing, and I'm pretty sure they're laughing at me.
They definitely are.
Exactly. That, and people are looking at me weird because they know I'm thinking way too hard about this situation.
Yeah.
All of that, it started to go away as I went through this. I couldn't put an exact time frame on it, but as I was going through this whole process and becoming less and less self-centered as time went on, because I realized the less I thought about myself, the less I worried about how much other people were thinking about me, and the more okay I became with who I was.
Yeah.
Because, let's face it, I'm awkward and goofy, and that's probably never going to change, you know?
That's one of the things that we like the best about you, though.
See, and before I would have been really self-conscious about that. You know, instead of doing something, like, uncoordinated and, like, stupid, like I would have done that, and I would have tried to hide it instead of just owning it. Like, yeah, this is part of who I am. Buckle up, it's not getting any better from here.
I think that's what you said like the first day we met, too.
Buckle up, this is who I am.
Well, not in those words specifically, but no, that's really good, because it just kind of seems like a lot of that unnecessary worry in our lives, because I mean there is always like a certain degree of worry. It's like a sense of urgency when something needs to happen. Like if you know someone comes to you and they're like bleeding or something, there's that urgency to call 911. But when there's just worry for the sake of worry, and it's just about you ruminating in your own thoughts, I mean, I feel like that's a lot of the fuel that just kind of like helps that. As you put those barriers up to try and protect yourself from that worry.
Right.
Yeah.
Should we go to the next one?
I think that would be lovely. So the next reading is from Daily Reflections, and the topic is attraction, not promotion. So from page 180 to 81 of the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, it says that through many painful experiences, we think we have arrived at what that policy ought to be. It is the opposite in many ways of usual promotional practice. We found that we had to rely upon this principle of attraction rather than promotion. While I was drinking, I reacted with anger, self-pity, and defiance against anyone who wanted to change me. All I wanted then was to be accepted by another human, simply as I was, and curiously, that is what I found in AA. I became the custodian of this concept of attraction, which is the principle of our fellowship's public relations. It is by attraction that I can best reach the alcoholic who still suffers. I thank God for having given me the attraction of a well-planned and established program of steps and traditions. Through humility and the support of my fellow sober members, I have been able to practice the AA way of life through attraction, not promotion. Any initial thoughts? But I mean, for me, anyway, you know, in my studies in the field of counseling, I find that this has a lot of parallels to a therapeutic tool called motivational interviewing. Now, motivational interviewing, its main purpose is to try to circumvent any issues of denial or try to get someone to really realize the full weight of one's own actions. You know, it's often one of the first techniques used to elicit some form of change. But the way that's really fascinating about it is the way that it's performed is usually asking like open-ended questions, like the Socratic method. It's more asking, how do you feel about this? What are the pros and cons of substance use? How do you feel that substance use is affecting your family? How do you think it's affected your job? And the really interesting thing about it is it's not necessarily someone being told what to think. It's them being asked these questions. They come up with the answers themselves. You know, that's the purpose of open-ended questioning. But when that happens, oftentimes the people they make a connection, something kind of clicks in their mind that they suddenly achieve this level of awareness. Is like, oh yeah. And the beauty of it is that they came up with that on their own volition. And so I find it interesting that there are a lot of parallels here because, you know, instead of promotion, where it's just kind of like, you know, it could be like force feeding someone just like, hey, this is great. But it's attraction where it's actually where someone is actively seeking you out because of their own awareness.
And that's one of the things when we were reading this, while I was drinking, I reacted with anger, self-pity, and defiance against anyone who wanted to change me. And before I really got sober or knew what the program was, a lot of well-meaning people who may or may not have really known what they were talking about or what they were saying exactly tried to tell me what I was. You know, you're an addict, you need to go over here, you need to do this. And even today, this is a flaw that I'm still working on, I don't like to be told what to do. You know, if you tell me to go right, I'm going to go left with an attitude. And when I got here and I sat down with somebody and we started going through this whole process, we read a lot of things out of the book. He told me things out of his experience, had me tell him things that I had been through and ways that I had felt, and allowed me the dignity to come to the conclusion myself whether I was or wasn't an addict. And based on that, you know, if I wasn't, and there was no judgment or no pressure on me, if I wasn't, that's fine. Like, so we wasted a little bit of time, I'm going to go on about my life. If I was, there's a way out. You know, we allow people, like you were saying, the dignity to come up with these answers on their own, if that made.
Oh yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I didn't end up in a 12-step fellowship from somebody like passing out a flyer. like, hey, you look like you're on drugs. Have this flyer. Go to this place, and your life will be Jolly Ranchers and gummy bears. I mean, that's the most appropriate way I could think to say it, but
It was good, very tasteful.
okay. But you know, through whatever avenue that I end up there, mine happened to be because of a police department. I get here and I see other people like me, right? And we were talking about this earlier, how those people being like me is what attracts me, because their lives are
Thank you.
their lives are getting better, right? And they've been through some of the same experiences, if not just similar experiences that I've been through, and their life is getting better. And it's something that I didn't think could happen. So that's what I'm attracted to, is people I can connect with, basically. And the truth has gotten me farther than anything else. And when these people, you know, they're standing up in front of a room or sitting with me at a coffee shop or something, and they speak the truth, and I can see that, that's when I'm like, okay, like this is getting through, and I feel similar, or I felt similar to the way that you're describing. So, I mean, you go to a mall and you see like the salesman trying to put weird stuff on your skin,
The kiosk people.
I mean, it must work sometimes, but like I avoid those people like the plague. You know?
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm much more likely to go try out a product if I see somebody like at a counter and they're like really enjoying something.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's what I'm attracted to is other people's lives getting better, people enjoying nice products, not
Nice
pushy
products.
salesmen.
Yeah.
Oh, got a question for you, Connor, from
Sweet.
Claudia. And she says, Connor, do you think that court order to go to rehab saved your life?
Yeah, definitely. If that system wasn't in place, I don't know where I would end up, to be honest. I mean, I've almost died a few times, and I don't know that I would be here if that didn't happen, if I didn't go to jail, if I wasn't ordered to go to a halfway house to do inpatient treatment. I mean, those things seemed really awful at the time, but definitely they played a part in saving my life. And it led me to the places that I needed to be and to the people that I needed to talk to. And it's sad that people have to go through things like that, and not a lot of us make it. But I needed that.
Oh, that's good. It's really good.
Thanks.
Oh, actually, I think we're pretty much out of time, but yeah. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back next week going over more Daily Reflections materials, and we'll see you next Monday.
Monday.
Monday.